You know, barbed wire, you see it all over the Texas Panhandle. It's part of our landscape now. It's been that way for 100 years. It was invented way back, I think in the 1870s. Barbed wire's transformed the Panhandle and all the Texas plains. It's significant and it can't be underestimated. It's allowed the farmers and the ranchers in this area and around the world to manage large herds of cattle and livestock. It's protected herds, it's protected properties. It's not meant to hurt the cattle, but it'll hurt you if you rub up against it. Defining boundaries. Barbed wire is designed to keep cattle from wandering where they ain't supposed to. Without it, the cattle will roam wherever they think they can find grass. Without it, they'll find themselves in dangerous territory, far from their safety and their protection from the rancher and the ranch. Without it, they can destroy farmland not meant to be grazed, not to mention the mess they'll leave behind. That's just the way it is when you don't have boundaries in your life. We all need healthy boundaries to help define what we are and who we are. Without healthy boundaries, we find ourselves wandering in dangerous territory. God has a great plan and designed us to live within healthy boundaries. We all need a little bit of this barbed wire in our life.
So if you recognize that voice as Bob Wilhite, is that right, Julie? Robert Wilhite? That was his voice. The church in Canyon did this series about 5 years ago. And I think he's a member of the church over here, so that was his narration about barbed wire. So we're going to be reading here from Mark chapter 1 in a little bit. Mark chapter 1, 32 through 38. Do you know boundaries are healthy? And healthy boundaries are needed to foster life. That's why we give our students, we give our kids boundaries to go by. Unhealthy boundaries will bring chaos to your life. So let's read Mark chapter 1, 32 through 38. See what Mark has to say. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases. And he cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. And rising very early in the morning while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place. And there he prayed. And Simon, those who were with him, searched for him. And they found him, and they said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." And he said to them, "Let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also. For that is why I came out." This invention revolutionized our part of the world, known as barbed wire. You'll say barbed wire. Say it again, barbed wire. There you go. The landscape of the Panhandle was forever changed. It allowed farmers and ranchers to manage their cattle and herds the ways that they hadn't been able to do before. Invented in the early 1870s, and there have been many varieties, hundreds of varieties of barbed wire. One of the largest ranches in Texas was the XIT. 6,000 miles of barbed wire. If you string it out from end to end and go from New York to LA and still have some wire left over, that's a lot of wire. I don't care who you are, right? The purpose of this wire is to keep herds in and keep other herds out. It defined a rancher's property and allowed the management of large herds of cattle. For farmers, it kept cattle out of causing harm and, damaging their crops. Its purpose is not to hurt the cattle, but to protect them from dangers. Otherwise, they would wander off and get into things they weren't supposed to get into within the boundaries of the ranch. The barbed wire defined the boundaries. Anyone ever had the great fortune or misfortune of Handling barbed wire? Yeah? Stringing it up and come back and bite you, whip around, take a hunk out of your flesh before you even knew what happened. Tough working with barbed wire. Don't say tough, but well worth it. Why was it worth it? It protects the cattle. It protected the ranch. So the first thing I want to talk about today is healthy boundaries. If you're taking notes, healthy boundaries foster life. If you want a healthy life, you need healthy boundaries. Too many people don't have healthy boundaries. And it brings chaos into their lives. Too many people don't have healthy boundaries because, well, it's hard work stringing up barbed wire. Healthy boundaries foster life. Boundaries aren't there to hurt you, but to help, to protect, and to give you life. So as we go through this series, we're going to look at some of the important issues and how we define boundaries that foster a healthy life. Without healthy boundaries in our lives, we don't know where we end and where somebody else begins. If you follow the crowd, go along to get along, who are you? You're just following the crowd. You've lost your identity. We don't know what we like, and we don't know what we don't like if we don't have boundaries. We don't know what we believe, we don't know what we don't believe if we don't have boundaries. We won't know how to feel, or we don't know what to feel or how to feel if we don't have boundaries. We won't have a sense of purpose if we don't have boundaries. If we don't have boundaries, we'll be easily swayed to go one way or the other. We find ourselves roaming in territory where we don't belong. Like we say, hey, don't hang out with that crowd. Same thing, we need boundaries, somebody telling us what to do and what not to do. We find ourselves roaming in territory where we don't belong. Territories like anxiety, depression, addictions. Why might we struggle with setting healthy boundaries? FOMO. Y'all say FOMO? FOMO. Fear of missing out. I remember I started a job way back in the 90s at the refinery when I lived in Abilene. And I was new, so I wanted to fit in. And so every year we'd do this fire training. We'd have to go out to the Abilene Fire Department training grounds because we could get fires at the refinery. We were the first line of defense. So as workers, we had to know how to put out oil fire, diesel fire, kerosene fire. So we'd go out to the Abilene Fire Department out by old Fort Phantom Lake, and it would do it every evening during the summer for 3 nights. And then we get done, we'd have to go back to the plant to put our stuff up, and then they'd hang out and drink beer till 2 or 3 in the morning. So I thought I needed to do that so I could fit in. Fear of missing out. Another things that keep us from setting healthy boundaries, we're afraid to disappoint someone. We're afraid to appear mean. We don't know our purpose. Some of us have miles and miles. I've seen miles and miles. Miles and miles of Texas. Of barbed wire to string up in our lives because we haven't set healthy boundaries. Others of us have allowed our fence to be broken down in areas, and we need some mending. We're going to talk about mending fences in 2 weeks. Either way, we need to understand the importance of healthy boundaries. Don't say healthy boundaries. No one else will help us set healthy boundaries. It's not somebody else's priority. It's ours. We have to know where we begin and where we end. Parents, teachers can have the same struggles. We can become so enmeshed with our kids and forget our boundaries are there to protect us. If not careful, it's easy to let our children to define our boundaries. We're jumping here, we're jumping there, we're going there, we're running ourselves ragged. We need a nanny to help us get everything everywhere we need to go. It's easy to allow our children to define our feelings. When we do that, we are in essence training our children how to live without boundaries. And this does not foster life, but chaos. If our kids learn that, or whoever it is we're over supervising, and they learn that, they don't have boundaries at home, and they go off to college, and all of a sudden somebody says you can't do this. Well, what do you mean? I did it at home. I could roam wherever I wanted to go, Bobby. I could come and go when I pleased. What do you mean I got to be in by 12 o'clock? Number 2. Unhealthy boundaries form chaos. That's not number 2, but here's number 2. Did you know God created us with boundaries? Best example of this is the 10 Commandments. It defines what's acceptable and it defines what's not acceptable. The Bible is full of boundaries to help us. Don't say help us. Don't we need help? I need help. Speed limit signs are boundaries. Stop signs are boundaries. The Bible is full of boundaries to help us and not hurt us. And when it comes to our relationship with God, we have to understand our part, our boundaries, and we have to understand God's part, His boundaries. So what is God's part? What do you think? What is God's part? Well, He's the Creator. He's the one who loves us. He's the one who saves us. He's the one who has forgiven us. He's the one who has called us to be disciples. Do you know we're all called to be disciples? Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God set a boundary. Now, whether you feel like you want to be a disciple or not, you were created to be a disciple. That's God's part. Our part is to be faithful and to follow His lead. Now, I might feel sad, you might feel sad, when someone's not saved, and you know that they're not saved, and they just don't want to have nothing to do with God or church. And we'll be sad about that because we want them to have what we experience. I mean, I can tell them, we can tell them about His saving grace, but I can't, you can't, we can't make them become a Christian. We can't make them be saved. The Spirit of God convicts. I don't. My part is to offer hope, share grace. God's part is saving people. So knowing my part, my boundary, keeps me from taking responsibility where I don't need to be doing so. Amen? Do you know people who get involved in other people's business? We all know that person, right? They've jumped over their boundary. Open the gate and put them back in their boundary. Gently. Don't use a cattle prod. That's not gentle. I've never had one used on me, but it looks like it's uncomfortable. Because when we know our boundaries, it keeps us from being anxious and fearful. Healthy Healthy, known boundaries foster life. Do you know what your boundaries are with people? Do you know what your boundaries are with work, with family? Number 3, how did Jesus handle boundaries? I mean, he's a perfect example, right? Well, let's read. Let's read it again. Mark 1, 32 through 38. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him, they searched for him. And they found him and said to him, Hey, dude, everybody's looking for you. And he said to them, Let us go to the next towns, that I may preach there also. That is why I came out. And just prior to what we just read, Jesus is in the city of Capernaum. And he's healed many people. He spent much time teaching in the synagogue. He cured Peter's mother-in-law. So y'all get this picture with me. Jesus is having massive crowds show up. More than we have here this morning. And he's the talk of the town. He has a captive audience. And what did he do? He healed those who were sick and he cast out demons. I mean, these days, I guess he'd be the kind of guy that they'd want to get him to run for one of the public offices, because he was such a demanded speaker. But he wanted to be out healing people and casting out demons. He saw the need and he healed. Our healthy boundaries don't keep us from helping others, but they tell us when and where we should do it. So we just read where Jesus wouldn't allow demons to speak. You ever wonder why Jesus wouldn't let demons speak? Huh? Y'all wonder why? Or is that just me? Perhaps it's because they knew him. You know, they were there when Jesus was there, when demons all fell from heaven, and they went along with Prince of Darkness. Perhaps it's because they knew him. Jesus demonstrates his power over them, setting a boundary. Jesus says, I know me better than you know me. I will not let you try and gain an advantage over me. How many times in your life have people tried to control you because they had knowledge of you? They tried to lord it over you. Remember what you did? I know what you did. I know you're the principal. I know you're the counselor. I know you can fix this if you wanted to. If you really liked me, you could put me in this class that I really want to be in, you know? However, don't say however. If you have healthy boundaries set in place, then that knowledge doesn't dominate you. You have the power to not listen to them. Jesus had the power as a Son of God to command them not to speak. We have the power as children of God not to listen and not to let those who know us to define us. Let me say that again. We have the power as children of God not to listen and not to let those who know us to define us. So going on with this passage, Jesus went out early in the morning to a deserted place and he prayed. Jesus knew his limits. Do you know your limits? What boundaries do you have in place to know your limits? He knew the demands of the world and the crowds were going to be challenging to his calling. He had to get away and pray. I have a mentor, a pastor friend, colleague, who early on in his ministry felt that he should get up at 5 o'clock every morning. The first 4 hours of his day were spent praying and reading And if you called him, texted, he doesn't answer until 9 o'clock. Because he was my pastor up in Dalhart when I was youth pastor up there. And one of his friends asked him one time, well, why do you do that? He said, well, if I'm going to try to lead the people that I'm leading, and I need to be ready and prepared. Right? For us to set and maintain healthy boundaries, we have to get away and pray. When's the last time you got away and prayed? I mean, deliberately, intentionally. Jesus did it. And if he's your Lord, if he's your Savior, aren't you going to want to follow him the way he did things? We want to follow other people. And then finally, they say, everyone is searching for you. Perhaps we've all felt this way. Everyone is searching for you. Everyone needs you. You've got to just do something about this, Jesus. Drop what you're doing and get back to the crowds. You have the beck and call of your spouse. You have the beck and call of your children. You have the beck and call of your employees. You have the beck and call of anyone who calls on you. Jesus' healthy boundaries allow him to say, let us go on to a neighboring town so that I can proclaim the message there. For that is why I came out. The whole city is clamoring for his attention. But he said no to what he knows is not what his true calling is. Jesus knew his purpose. He knew where he was going. He placed boundaries in his life to achieve the bigger purpose. He could have healed more. He could have spent more time. But in the end, it would have kept him from his purpose of healing the whole world. Do you ever set out to do things in your day and you get distracted and nothing gets done? Or you don't do any of them well? You don't have boundaries set. Hey, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And I'm not going to try to be a super mom or superhero, super teacher, and I'm not going to try to do them all at the same time and prove that I can do it. I remember one time I was applying for a job, and the guy asked my wife at the time, my late wife, said, is Jean a good multitasker? She said, well, I don't know. I wasn't. So I didn't get the job. He was a good friend of mine. He's still a good friend today, but I didn't get to help him because I couldn't do what he did. I couldn't multitask. I couldn't juggle here, juggle there, juggle here, juggle there. But we do it. We do it so we can prove a point that we can do it. It's not healthy. Jesus didn't let anybody interfere with his greater calling. So it's a fact, Jack. They'll say that. What was that? Robinson? Cyrus? Cyrus said that. It's a fact, Jack. Healthy boundaries foster life. Y'all say that. Healthy boundaries foster life. So youth, all those time when you feel like you have restrictions put on you that are unbearable, they're there for your good. Say yay. All right. So we're going to do some reflection time, and I want to invite you to consider where you need to string up some barbed wire. Just between you and God. Ask God. Say, God, where do I need to string up some barbed wire so I can have a healthy relationship with you?